Welcome to the Holistic Matters podcast, sponsored by Standard Process. Standard Process is a trusted brand at the forefront of high-quality, whole food-based nutritional supplements. Visit holisticmatters.com for a wide range of holistic health content, including articles, videos, continuing education, and more to keep you up to date on the latest nutrition science and herbal health trends. I'm today's host, Dr. Sarah Clarke, chiropractor, functional medicine practitioner, and Standard Process clinical educator. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Holistic Matters podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Clarke, and I'm so excited to welcome our special guest today, Mimi Hernandez. Mimi is the Herbal Therapy Liaison and a clinical educator for Standard Process. She is a clinical registered herbalist and has over 25 years of experience in botanical medicine. She is also a published author of two incredible books, the National Geographic Herbal and the Backyard Guide to Edible Wild Plants, which combine her clinical knowledge with a passion for accessible, plant-based wellness education. We're so lucky to have her here today speaking with us on the powerful impact of specific whole food-based red phytonutrients. So thank you so much for being here, Mimi.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm really happy to be here. And thank you for reading that bio. I will say that at heart, I'm a kitchen herbalist, which is why some of these topics really resonate with me. I really love exploring the intersection between plants and nutrition and the kitchen and our health. So I'm excited to get going here.
That is wonderful. I think this is an area where so many people are becoming more and more interested about how they can do this on their own and kind of what your books talk about, what's in their own backyard and how they can start exploring that and learning. So really excited just to bring more of that information to everyone today. And what I would love to start with is actually just getting a glimpse more into Standard Process's organic farm. And I think for anyone who's gotten the chance to go there, they really know how special it feels. Like the earth there has an energy, the plants have an energy. And I know that you've gone multiple times and have spent time with the plants there and the crops. And I would love to just hear kind of your take on one of our newer, really unique crops, which is mountain spinach. I think a lot of our listeners maybe haven't even heard of it. They don't know anything about its benefits, but if you could just maybe describe what your experience was like with it, that could be a really interesting way just to kind of kick this off and start learning about these red phytonutrients.
Oh, sure. I mean, I was really excited to get in the field and really play with this plant. And I went by myself and I just kind of drove back in there into the farm. And it was kind of a misty, dewy morning. And, the first thing I noticed was just these glorious fields of red. And it was just so striking. And I also noticed, because it was a misty morning, like the soil was so rich. I am glad I had hiking boots that morning, because I just, this black soil just piled up on my shoes. But it was such a contrast with these red, brilliant, like fuchsia colored leaves against this dark, rich soil. And I just put that soil in my hand and contrasted it with the leaves. And it was just so surreal. And, it just like struck me how, one of the things I know about mountain spinach is that it loves to like sequester minerals. It like draws up these minerals from that soil. So I just sat there like noticing, really occurred to me how well these plants have it on this farm. They've got the best of everything. You could tell this was some healthy soil. And it just led me to believe that these plants were going to be like the healthiest, so rich and nutrient dense, right? So I did hear, this is something you can see these fields from as you drive past the farm. And I heard from other people at Standard Process that weekend how neighbors had been stopping by to check these out, that It's just such a sight to see from passersby. And I can just imagine, because normally crops are green, right? In the fall, you might get some bursts of yellow. And here you have this like vivid, vibrant red, just fields as far as I can see. And it was so stunning.
That's amazing. And what month did you see them at that color?
So I saw them early in the crop. They were very vivid red at that time, almost pink. So that's why I say fuchsia. I have come up with so many colors to describe red throughout this whole process. But I would say fuchsia was a good place for them at the time. And later in the season, as they matured, because when I saw them, they were probably about 10, 12 inches tall. So they were still young. But then they grow to be, maybe a couple feet tall. And by that stage, just based on the pictures that were shared with me, they had like darkened to more of a burgundy color. So brilliant. I was there at the best time, I think, to capture that brilliant, like pink vibrance of the crop. And yeah, and as we know, because we're going to go into this, that these colors are associated with bioactive pigments. And so then you start to nerd out while you're out there. I did. I was like, look at these betacyanins. So that's how a plant nerd stands out in the field.
That's amazing. So the betacyanins, would those kind of be those main pigments that give it that kind of like really rich color, kind of similar to your shirt? If anyone else can see Mimi's shirt, but it's a beautiful kind of like that dark fuchsia color.
Well, I would say, and it's hard to describe for listeners, this betacyanin is this bright, dark pink. I think my shirt's more on the burgundy spectrum, depending on the camera lighting, of course. But yes, bright, almost neon pink. And this is the betacyanins. So a lot of us might be familiar with it if you're into trending mocktails and cocktails, because another fruit that's really high in these betacyanins is prickly pear fruit. And so when we're out drinking like our cactus cooler margaritas or cocktails, it's kind of a trend now to put this brilliant pink in there. And those are the betacyanins. Or that really bright pink dragon fruit. It's also betacyanin rich. So another just analogy to this pink. And later we'll talk about beets. But I know that when you see beets and you see the bottom of the stems coming out of the beetroot, sometimes they're very bright pink, and that is the betacyanins. So just such a joy to behold.
That's amazing. And yeah, when I was in Arizona, I remember I'd never seen the prickly pear margarita before. So, of course, I'm seeing people walking around with these beautiful, bright pink drinks. It was a cocktail, not a mocktail, Mimi. Don't judge me. But these prickly pear margaritas, it was just so beautiful, very unlike anything I've ever seen. Had to try it. It was delicious. And lo and behold, like it's not just a beautiful color. Like they do have these antioxidant and these anti-inflammatory properties. So made me feel a little bit better about, having the drink. So they do have
It's
these
good for
amazing
you.
benefits. Exactly. Some of these parts, these amazing betacyanins, we should bring them in more just because they do have these awesome effects. And I know we'll kind of get into this more in this conversation, but like really impacting our cardiometabolic system and our longevity. And they have all of these incredible compounds. So not just about the color, but I think we all know that when we bring in these colorful foods, they end up having these incredible polyphenols. So really being able to like touch all areas of our health is so cool.
Absolutely.
And now I'm nerding out. So
Right.
you're in good company here with me, Mimi.
Well, one of the things I like to do as a clinical herbalist is really connect tradition with science. That is probably the biggest mantra of my career. And you'll see this in my books, and you'll see this in my storytelling when I teach. But, come to find out, because one of my questions was, well, hardly any of us has heard of mountain spinach, red orac might be another way to look it up. But still, it's not something we just find at the grocery store, right? Or even those of us who are gardeners, it's not something that we're going to plant. And so I started digging into some of the tradition and some of the history with mountain spinach and found that it's actually one of the first cultivated leafy greens. And I say leafy greens because they're still considered greens, even though they're red most of the time. They're also known as saltbush. But they've been cultivated long before spinach, which is what most of us know, the green common spinach. And so they were really a staple crop back in the day. And I just thought this was fascinating. Like, why did it fall out of favor? And I think that's when green spinach came in and kind of took over the kitchen. So this mountain spinach, not only in the kitchen, it was also very traditional in old time medicine in Eastern Europe and the Mediterranean. And, it makes sense in the kitchen. It has this really, I did get to taste it in the field. So this was probably the highlight. I'm like, I'm going to taste this. I'm going to feel it. It has this really curious flavor. It's mild. It's very tender. It's got this really smooth texture. So when I eat green spinach, I can kind of feel it on my teeth, and I think that's like the oxalates. And here with the mountain spinach leaf, it's so smooth. It has less oxalates in it. Has this very tender, soft texture, and it has this kind of mineral rich flavor, almost like a mineral tonic, a slight saltiness. And come to find out, it's actually a halophyte plant, which means it thrives in mineral rich and saline rich soils. It's able to survive where other plants don't. And then this shows up in its flavor. So when a plant is able to bring these salts into its leaves, it does another fascinating thing where it boosts its alkalinity in order to buffer its own tissues against this saline. And so that comes through as this kind of alkaline green. And it just really adds to the whole vibrance of the tonic leaf. And so really unique. I think it's going to make a comeback. I think people are more into these vibrant colors. I know this is something I'm going to think about growing in my garden. I'm an avid gardener. One of the things, again, like comparing it with common green spinach, is that spinach is a winter plant. It's something we're planting now in the fall, maybe in the early spring when there's still a little frost. Whereas this brilliant red mountain spinach really thrives in the heat of summer. So that makes sense on the farm, right? It's a pure summer crop. It really thrives when it's hot, when it's sunny. And this really makes sense because these electrolytes, right? They're really nourishing for hot summer bodies, for people who are very active in the summer. And so this then again makes sense with how it was being used in Eastern Europe as a tonic for depletion and restorative summer tonic, just to replenish. So I just love all of this. It's such a boosting resilience in general.
Definitely. And I think it's so interesting with the mineral content because, of course, if it's grown in the mineral rich soil, like you're talking about, right? Like really dark, rich, you can feel those minerals. It's interesting thinking about things like the trace mineral chromium coming up into it and like being in a high amount in mountain spinach. So when you're talking about Eastern Europe, it's like, okay, we know that they do a great job in those blue zones of living longer and really supporting that longevity, and makes sense, right? If chromium is declining with age naturally and we need that for our healthy glucose metabolism and insulin sensitivity. Like all of these things are working together to kind of support throughout the lifespan. So I think that's really interesting and special that you got to experience it. And
Mhm, mhm.
yeah, really powerful kind of superfood when we're thinking about the entire lifespan. So thanks for sharing that.
I was gonna say it's also very protein rich. This is something we don't think of with greens, but more it's actually higher in protein than quinoa, which is also in that same plant family. We see quinoa kind of resurrected as the ancient grain that's trending now for the protein conscious. But it's pretty fascinating how nutrient dense the leaf is.
Definitely. And even if it was in the grocery store, that wouldn't even be on the label. Maybe the protein would be, but all these other things like the betacyanins, the chromium, that wouldn't even make it on the label. So really cool
Mhm,
to kind of get
mhm.
this special insight. We're diving deep into mountain spinach, and hopefully that can just lead people to maybe do more of their research, or these healthcare practitioners really bringing that into practice and sharing with their patients all the different aspects that really go into these plant nutrients. So really interesting. And I do want to really pick your brain about another really special crop at the farm, which is red beetroot. I think people hopefully are really familiar with beets. I think I see a lot of beet commercials for everything it does for vasodilation and healthy circulation, due to these nitrates that are just naturally present in beets. I know that that's not everything that's in there, though. So I would love if you can speak to that a little bit and just give us maybe a little bit more insight into, is there more to beets than just the nitrates, and why are they so beneficial, and maybe why should people think about bringing them in or even just promoting them in their practice for cardiometabolic health?
Absolutely. And long story short, there is more to the story than just nitrates. While nitrates are definitely known, like you said, for endothelial health, they're also really associated with this quality of beets that helps muscle performance. Because imagine your better oxygen delivery, better nutrient delivery to the muscles, and so, what we see in research is better recovery, less muscle soreness, inability to go farther, basically. And so, one of the studies that noted these outcomes compared the nitrate rich beet juice to just nitrate salts and found that the beet juice did better compared to just isolated nitrate salts. So, what's going on? Is there more to the story? And there absolutely is. I mean, we're looking at the whole matrix here with, again, betalains. Betalains are the larger umbrella. They include pigments of a variety of colors: yellow, orange, red. But it's these red pigments, which are, again, the beta cyanins. And so then they repeat these kind of studies in um, endurance performance and find that even a single dose, even taking it for a week, leads to faster 5K, lower heart rates, lower blood lactates, just better efficiency, even without the nitrates. So, better running economy, basically. And that just means it's part of the performance package, helping that performance level in not just athletes, but also in rehabilitation, in I'd like to think of it for people just starting a workout to take more beets, to eat more beets, drink the beet juice. Uh, One study that, really speaks to me, and that I recommend, it leads me to recommend beets for postmenopausal women, is that a mere half a cup of beetroot juice before, a couple hours before working out just led to a faster walking speed. 40 meters longer in a 6-minute walk. I mean, that's a lot of territory, right?
That's significant.
Just better mobility compared to training alone. So I really have come to see it as this like workout aid for those of us just starting out, all the way to, runners and people in more competitive sports. And then we think of the synergy with mountain spinach. Mountain spinach is not as thoroughly studied as beetroot. Beetroot is famous for its nitrates. It's well studied for its betalains. And so we can extrapolate from that information about the betacyanins and apply it to mountain spinach, which has at least 12 betacyanins that have been documented. But mountain spinach has more because, like beets, it's this whole matrix synergy. Mountain spinach has these really high levels of food-based chromium. And the chromium is also really healthy for active bodies, especially people who sweat a lot, because we have chromium loss through aging, through sweating on hot days. And so that chromium in the red mountain spinach really becomes appropriate for summer fitness, really heavy endurance work. And so then we pair these together, right? And we have this synergy of these two red superfoods that I think really give us an edge. They're replenishing electrolytes. They're helping us deliver blood flow to our muscles. They're helping reduce our muscle soreness. They're just generally anti-inflammatory and antioxidant. And I think altogether just giving us this extra edge on the court.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually really wish that I had known about all of this because I grew up in Ohio. So I grew up running, and I just remember how humid it was in the summer. And I would come home and I would be like, drenched in sweat, pouring, and I would have
Mhm.
water, which now, right, looking back with everything we
Mhm.
know, it's like if I had only known to come home and have my beet juice, have my mountain spinach, have maybe a salad with beets and some mountain spinach in there, like, whoa, how much further could I have gone? How much better could my recovery have been? So I think it's really interesting, just like bridging that gap, saying it's really something to think about for everyone, right? Like people who are maybe sedentary, they're working at a desk, all the way to elite athletes who are trying to just get a little bit of that edge.
Mhm.
And all these things, this personalized nutrition is so crucial because it really makes a difference. So thanks for sharing that about those studies. I find that really interesting.
I agree. And I find myself these days sometimes craving beets. I don't know if you've ever just like craved beet juice. Well, I'm in that category now. And I used to think it was because they were sweet. I tend to not eat that much sugar. And sure, it might satiate that sweet tooth for me. Uh, but then I started avoiding it because I was like, well, they must be high in sugar. They taste so sweet. And we know that a lot of beets are, in fact, grown for sugar. But when we look at these like organic beets that are grown for nutrient density, I think the story shifts and they're actually low glycemic. So it's this paradox that it's actually helping us with blood sugar, and so it just kind of adds to this complexity of the beet story that fascinates me.
That's amazing. So we might be able to have something sweet and actually still lower that blood glucose after eating, which is really impressive. Um, and I think just even thinking about the broader effect on the endothelial health and like their ability of the beta lanes, like you talked about, to just bring down LDL levels, reduce triglycerides. And so it's just important throughout the lifespan. And I think even more important now, I know heart disease is still the number one killer in the US, but now like we
Mhm.
see all of these effects of cardiometabolic syndrome affecting even kids. So it's like when we think about, man, who needs to hear this? In my mind, like being a mom, I'm sure you feel this too. It's like I want our kids to be eating these things, right? Like support that
Mhm.
cardiometabolic health, like even from a really young age. Cause
Mhm.
hopefully research will be, coming out more and more on this, but I think it just can have that effect young on their entire lifespan and hopefully reduce the risk of issues later on. So it's just so important
Mhm.
and just cool that we're finding out more and more about really the effects on food, but like from that clinical research perspective.
I think you brought up a really important point there with cardiometabolic health. But one of the things I like to look at is not just like cardiometabolic syndrome or cardiometabolic disease, but optimal cardiometabolic health, which most people are lacking in. In fact, there is really rich study called Trends and Disparities in Cardiometabolic Health Among U.S. Adults. And the results of this study indicate that 6.8% of US adults have optimal cardiometabolic health. Only 6.8% of us have optimal cardiometabolic health. And they really looked at this decline over a couple decades where normalized blood sugar, for example, went from 59% in the year 2000 to only 37% by 2018. And ideal body weight, another measure, went from 34% in 2000 to 24% in 2018. And hypertension and abdominal heaviness. And so, all these measures of cardiometabolic health are just trending downward. And it's kind of this, red alarm, if you will, of
Alert,
like,
alert, something's
yes,
happening.
yes. Of like, maybe we should, pay attention to this and, um, just like you said, maybe we should pay attention to it earlier, before it becomes a real clinical issue.
We'd like to take a quick moment to mention our sponsor, Standard Process. Standard Process is a family owned and practitioner focused company that makes high quality, whole food based supplements. Many of the ingredients used in the company's whole food based supplements are grown on site on their 850-acre certified organic farm. The research and development teams at their Nutrition Innovation Center inform the Standard Process farm team about the best crops to grow and organic farming insights that they share with colleagues and community to help advance organic agriculture as a whole. Clinical insights from their Nutrition Innovation Center have also allowed them to optimize drying times, extract types, and ingredient processing techniques that can contribute to health benefits. State-of-the-art technology also helps to better understand the levels of nutrient density in their crops and determine the ideal strains for ingredients based on their abilities to support unique health needs. To learn more about Standard Process, visit standardprocess.com/only@sp.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think all the healthcare practitioners that are working on this are bringing nutrition in and bringing exercise in. It's so key. But I think hopefully people are becoming even like more and more aware of what's going on. Like I think of things like the Apple Watch. I know I
Mm.
love that my Apple Watch reminds me to get up and move. I think if you're sitting at a desk and you're really engulfed in a project, all of a sudden, if I'm not wearing it, like a couple hours go by and I'm like, oh my goodness, I haven't moved, I haven't stretched, I haven't really drank water. So it can be a good almost like reminder to like tap you on the shoulder and just say, hey, like, are you taking care of yourself today? Are you moving? And I love that it just tells me to even like stand up, right? Like you've been sitting for a while, stand up. I think micro breaks can be really, really helpful. I think if you're in an office and you're naturally walking around talking to people, you might get a few more steps. But if you are working from home, like a lot of us do now,
Mhm.
and we're looking at our computer, we really might need that reminder to take those breaks and just move, get our blood flow going, and maybe even use our muscles because we know muscles are super important for longevity, for our cardiometabolic health, and just to make sure we're staying strong throughout the age span. And I mean, when I hear like in the 30s, muscle starts declining, that
Mhm.
scares me, right? Like you think
Mhm.
about older aged. And I think the older you get, that age like shoots back, right? Like when you're a kid,
Mm-hmm.
you're thinking, oh, 20's old. When you're a teen, you're thinking 30's old. And then you get to be 30 and you're like, what? I'm young. I'm probably aging myself here, but I just think it just gets to be really important to put it at the forefront of our minds. So anytime we can just, pair those nutrition and even micro breaks, it can make a difference.
I am with you, Sarah. I need those breaks. I need to set them into my alarms. I need one of those apps. And I think a lot of people can relate, especially so many of us are sitting at our desks all day. We're really in the digital age, right? And we've got our eyes on the screen. We're relatively inactive, many of us, and activity breaks are a great way to address that. And I know, like, it took me 3 years to write my book, and during that time I just was like 12 hours a day just sitting and typing and sitting and typing. If I ever do that again, I'm taking activity breaks for sure. And one of the things I'm working on now, because I get in such great focus, is to get up and do some squats like on the hour. And so when I saw this study on squats, and this was related to another red compound called astaxanthin, and we can talk about this in a little bit. I'd love to, go deeper there. But it was a study of taking this whole algal biomass that was equivalent to 4 milligrams of astaxanthin, and it led to 3 times more squats. So just simple, tangible, let's do more squats in our activity breaks. And so I just, want to get my hands on some of that nutrition and see if I can elevate my activity breaks and consider this whole dynamic with like my teenager who's like constantly on screens. He's a really smart kid, so he's always researching on his tablet, but then he's watching cartoons, and I have boundaries here in my home, but maybe there's nutrition for all this to kind of help us deal with the modern day.
I know like the 20-20-20 rule for like digital eye strain, like every 20 minutes looking away 20 feet for 20 seconds. But again, I think even something like that, every 20 minutes, that's so hard to remember. Every 20 minutes setting an alarm, that's kind of tough. So that can be, I guess, something to try, but hard to remember. And I think blue light blocking glasses are kind of getting a little bit more steam, just to at least protect from that blue light and protect our circadian rhythms. But I think when we think about nutrition, everyone wants something that's like quick and easy to like eat to help with these things, and it helps from the inside out. So it kind of provides this like interesting almost hack to supporting protection against digital eye strain. So yeah, I think astaxanthin is a great one to maybe dive into with that. And is that something that might be able to help some people?
Well, I'd like to call astaxanthin, I like to think astaxanthin gives us the red advantage over the blue screen. And that's because there's been so many studies on astaxanthin and eye health, or this visual acuity, really digital eye strain. If we want to put a phrase to it, 4 to 12 milligrams a day for 4 to 8 weeks reduce digital eye strain by more than 27%. And this actually was in, some of these studies were actually in children, because we know that's where we're really concerned. But, we talked about mountain spinach and beetroot for muscle fatigue. Well, there's little tiny muscles in the eyes too. And these little tiny muscles are involved in our focus. In general, with astaxanthin, people are reporting less fatigue in their eyes, better recovery of tired eyes, and even visual acuity and focus and depth perception, which I think now is helping us not just with digital eye strain, but getting back to this exercise performance. Like maybe it gives us a court advantage if we're able to see the ball better, or, with target practice is just going to maybe boost our finesse there in the world of sports. So,
oh my goodness. Right now we're, peak football season. And sometimes it's like they're throwing that 40-yard pass and they catch that. And you're like, how? How did you catch that? I know you're a professional, but it does make sense, right? It's like if your eyes are a little bit off, or if you have that advantage of that clear acuity, it makes a difference. And that could be the difference between winning and losing. I think from that to even your weekend pickleball, like all of it counts.
Pickleball, that's definitely the scene I work with these, I work more in the, I think, middle age and up population. I work a lot with postmenopausal women, and that is definitely an avenue. They're out there on the pickleball court, just trying to live this active lifestyle. And so I think all this is really relevant to the beauty of it is that these red superfoods are just so relevant across the spectrum of activity.
Little do they know, they bring these things in and all of a sudden they're smashing the ball, they're beating their friends, they're, recovering from any aches and pains faster. All of a sudden it's really going to like give them that up level. So that's awesome to kind of bring all these things together, because the benefits and what they do really, I think, overlap a lot. So really powerful. And I think in terms of resilience, we've talked a lot about that today, and just the importance of the body being resilient throughout the aging process. So I know, of course, our muscles need to be resilient. Our glucose regulation has to be resilient to stresses. Even our brain as we age, of course, has to be resilient to things like inflammation or plaque aggregation. And so I think about the organic crops that you're talking about. And I know we've kind of mentioned this before, but that concept of Xenohormesis and how these plants go through stress and how it can actually impact us as humans and our function. So I'd love if you could just kind of walk us through maybe what that means to you, and do these plants have the power to kind of impact us on that level and support our longevity too?
I love this topic, especially as an herbalist. Many of the herbs that we take or that we use on our homestead here are actually wild crafted, which means we wild harvested them. And there is this concept running through this herbal tradition that wild plants are more healthy for you. And the reason for this is because they struggle more. And because they struggle more, they need to make more bioactive compounds to protect themselves, most of these being antioxidants and, plant compounds that protect these plants, these tissues from the sun or from drying out. So this term, Xenohormesis, was coined by a Harvard scientist. His name was David Sinclair. And in his book, Lifespan, he really talked about how as plants get more stressed, they create more denser phytonutrient content. And when we eat them, we really benefit from that. And it makes sense. You look at a plant like ginkgo biloba, which is one of the oldest plants known, on Earth, known for longevity. Like, how did it survive so many eras, and how is it still here, and how are we benefiting from it? Well, I think like what the compounds and all those antioxidants that give ginkgo its longevity, we're finding are beneficial for us too. And I think this is relevant here with organic growing, where you don't do all the work for the plant. You don't, apply pesticides, for example. You let the plant figure it out. You give it its soil. You do give it like the nutrition-rich soil. But there's a point where the plant fends for itself. And David Sinclair pointed this out in his book of how organic growing leads to more phytonutrient-rich plants, which in turn just benefits us better. Real great example of this, and something we've just been touching on, is this astaxanthin story, especially when we consider where in nature we find astaxanthin. So astaxanthin is a red pigment. It's a xanthophil carotenoid. And I think our most familiar places here might be in our seafood, like wild salmon, for example. And when you think of wild salmon and they're swimming upstream and they're swimming against the current and they're going on these long migrations, and you have to wonder, like, how are they doing all this? And one of the things that we're finding is that hue in the salmon flesh is actually a compound called astaxanthin, and that perhaps that is giving them the muscular edge um, to bear that endurance, to accomplish these events, and to preserve their um, sensitive fatty acids. And so we do get astaxanthin when we eat wild salmon, but there's no greater concentrated source in nature of astaxanthin than there is in this algae called, it's actually, again, ironically called green algae, Hematococcus pluvialis. And the interesting thing about this green algae is that when it gets stressed, it turns red because it fills itself up with astaxanthin. It produces astaxanthin. And then you have to wonder, why is it filling itself with astaxanthin? Well, apparently this red stage of the algae is a survival stage. And when it's filled with the astaxanthin, it's protected against the sunlight, it's protected against drying out. And this gives it that it's a survival technique. The astaxanthin concentrates in lipids in the cell, and then the cell goes dormant. We call them the red cyst, the survival cyst. And altogether, this becomes like a survival matrix within this algae that allows it to survive for months, even years, until conditions come back favorable, and then it can, release its green again. So it's just fascinating. Then it makes you wonder, well, what if I had some of that?
Can I have some, please? Right?
When I'm feeling a little dried out and stressed and overexposed.
I think everyone can use some of that because I think we all feel stress. It's normal, but the drying out, that's really interesting. Like when you're talking about protection from the sun and UV light and drying out. And so it sounds like it potentially could benefit the skin. Potentially.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really back to this concept of Xenohormesis, that maybe if we eat it, we'll inherit those survival signals. And so, of course, this fuels a whole lot of research and inquiry about astaxanthin. And as it turns out, the astaxanthin has become this kind of trending nutraceutical for skin health. It's an antioxidant, of course. It's got this really interesting molecular structure. And if you were to look at this structure, you'd see that it's like this long chain. It's like a bridge with two like polar opposite heads. And so when you really look at it microscopically, what happens is that it seems to embed itself in cell membranes, including mitochondrial membranes. And so this is really interesting because, we have vitamin C that's water soluble. We have vitamin E that's lipid soluble. And astaxanthin's lipid soluble, but it anchors to both ends of the membrane, the fluid spaces, and it spans the lipid spaces. So it's this antioxidant that's really quenching free radicals all along the cell membranes, including the mitochondria. We know the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, is generating enormous amounts of energy, which means enormous amounts of oxidation, right? Potentially. And so if we could get like a molecule in these sites to kind of run these free radicals away and quench them, imagine the clean energy, imagine the integrity of these membranes. And then if we kind of widen the lens to look at more macroscopic perspectives or analogies, we do look at the skin also. It's like the membrane between our internal and external facing self. And, just really interesting that astaxanthin is, as it turns out, really great for skin health. It's helping with skin hydration. It's helping with moisture, reducing fine lines and wrinkles, addressing roughness. And, at heart, it's like reducing damage from overexposure to UV light. So, really gives us the edge. Again, for those active bodies out in the sun, it's really reducing the signs of photo aging. Seems to be the consensus here with research. And again, I just love tracing it back to that story of, wow, it's helping these microscopic algae protect themselves in the sun. And lo and behold, it's doing that for us too, on a theoretical basis. So it just really makes sense to consider astaxanthin, and especially in this whole matrix context of the algae, for protection and resilience with the skin, with our energy, with our mitochondria, with exercise performance. Yeah,
Absolutely.
it does.
The list goes on and on. I think that's what's like so incredible. It's like, what is it not doing? Because all these things are so great for aging, our cardiometabolic
Mhm.
health. Like we talked about our energy, right? Like our mitochondria.
Mhm.
And of course, as we age, we just want to keep like feeling that good energy. Anyone with toddlers
Mhm.
knows like, oh my gosh, they have endless energy. They want to keep running around for hours and hours. And so I think just like keeping that mitochondria strong is so important and gives us the ability to like continue to stay active, stay mobile, like we're talking about. And not only that, but just from the skin side, I think that's so incredible because when we think about like our skin, that is a huge industry, right? Like so many people are
Mhm.
getting lasers and expensive facials and chemical peels and like all of these outward things. But I think looking inward and being like, what are we really putting in that can support too? And so having those studies, like you mentioned, that really increase collagen production, increase moisture, elasticity, these are all things that people are looking for. So just really powerful that this red pigment from an algae can really have these incredible clinically relevant effects. And just, I'm in awe of nature, Mimi, as you can probably tell.
I agree. And then when you put them all together, just astaxanthin and this whole algae in the context of food, with beets and with mountain spinach, and we have all this like synergistic complexity that comes together because we won't even dive deep into all the research on astaxanthin and exercise endurance and fitness, because it's definitely given even elite athletes an edge, all coming together to really provide support for cardiometabolic health and, like you said, the skin and
The eyes, everything you need.
the muscles.
Yes. Everything you need. You need your energy. You want good skin. You need good eyesight, good energy to get through the day.
To some
And
muscle tone. We have astaxanthin associated with boosts in muscle strength, in muscle size, in muscle quality. We have fitness elite cyclists who are shaving minutes off their race time in studies with astaxanthin. So, yeah, it's pretty impressive to watch this research and these trends emerging for the health span and for endurance and all these great things that make you feel alive, right?
absolutely. And even in people who might be struggling with like glucose regulation, like those with like type 2 diabetes, I know you talked before about just like its effect on glucose and hemoglobin A1C. So I think it just has so many far reaching effects that, of course, if your insulin is more sensitive, probably going to be healthier metabolically as well. And so performing better, like we said, on the court or on the football field, tennis court, whatever it is. So just improving that microvascular flow, delivering those nutrients with more oxygenation. You're going to get your squats throughout the day, all of these great things.
Absolutely. Yes. The astaxanthin in cardiometabolic research is pretty impressive. Even in preclinical research, and I think this is the direction it's going, it's showing that it can be protective for pancreatic cells, reducing oxidation on that level, really assisting, helping improve like glucose transport across membranes and into muscle cells. Like these are really fascinating things, fascinating potential here for some of these compounds.
I think so. And I think a lot of our practitioners listening are working with patients just on a daily basis to improve not only how they feel, but improve that health span, like we've been talking about. And so, Mimi, you said it so well. You were like, we don't only want to improve the number of years that we're living, right? But we want to improve our life in our years. And that really stuck with me because I think when we all think about aging, I think, at least for me, like one of the most important things is like continuing to do what I love for as long as possible. I think we all want to bring in the things that bring us the most joy and be able to move around and be with our family, be in nature, whatever that looks like, if it's gardening, playing sports, whatever it is for you. But we need, of course, our energy and our muscles for most of those things, and our brain. And so I think all of these things just work together to help people live healthier lives for longer, which is so powerful and just so applicable to anyone, I think.
I agree. It's not about adding years to our life. It's about putting life into our years. And that's, I think, the central tenet of a health span. And what excites me most about this theme that we're talking about today is that these aren't exotic ingredients. They're not inaccessible. We're working with them. They're traditional. They're well studied. Modern science here is really putting added layers onto what we know about ecology and the environment and traditional food pathways. And it's all coming together, from these forgotten leafy greens to the humble beet to these algae pigments. I think, together they come packaged as nature's survival wisdom, and we can bring them into our lives and we can put life into our years and benefit from these.
Absolutely. Very well said. And we covered a lot today. I think we went really deep into a lot of different incredible red phytonutrients, and I think there's a lot to take away here. So thanks for being here, Mimi. Thank you so much for sharing your experience of the farm and everything that you know about these incredible plant compounds. And just wanted to say thanks for taking time to chat with me today.
Well, thank you. It was my pleasure to be here talking about one of my favorite topics. So thank you for inviting me, and I'd look forward to collaborating again.
That sounds great, Mimi. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Tune in every first and third Thursday for new Holistic Matters episodes, and be sure to like and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. Remember to visit holisticmatters.com for a wide range of holistic health content to keep you up to date on the latest nutrition science and herbal health trends. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. And a special thank you to our sponsors, Standard Process. Thank you for listening. Visit holisticmatters.com for more content. And remember, that's holistic with a W.